much of the book is set in a prison camp called Ketzio it's in the Negev desert, right by the Egyptian border. It was outside my frame of reference as a kid from Long Island. The day I arrived there, we had 6,200 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. Everyone from the junior rock throwers all the way to the founders of Hamas. I was lucky in the sense that when I got there, I wasn't made just a guard with a gun and a tower. It translates rather comically from Hebrew as prisoner counselor. Which when I heard that, of course, the first thing I thought was that we'd be advising Islamic Jihad terrorists how to fill out their college application. And I made that pathetic joke to one of my commanders, who didn't laugh and didn't get it at all. And I realized it was that moment. I was learning so quickly at this point in my life. I was learning so much about Israel. I learned that Israel holds the greatest concentration of unfunny Jews on the planet Earth. But I filtered that through. But I filtered that knowledge, which I think most people here would probably agree with. I hope. I filtered that piece of knowledge, that observation, through the prism. The prism I still use to sort of understand the world of Jews through this very complex Zionism of mine, and I felt okay with the fact that Israelis had no sense of humor, because I realized that why do Jews have a sense of humor as a self-defense mechanism? And I thought that you don't need a sense of humor when you have an air force, and so that was a positive development, an advancement in Jewish history, that you can have a country filled with people who are so normal that they're not cracking jokes and cracking wise as a defense mechanism the whole time. So I was in this prison, and prisoner counselor meant that I was really up close to these prisoners. I knew as a left-wing Zionist that there would one day be a Palestinian state, and I realized I had a chance to meet these people who are leaders, going to be the leaders of Palestine, and indeed many of them are. There's a huge section in the book about this, and all the disconcerting things I learned about them, and disconcerting things I learned about Israel and the conflict. There are also things that aren't disconcerting that I learned. I actually, and this is a debate that we can have whether these people became my friends or not. But I actually grew fond of a few of these prisoners. There's one in particular I write about who I got to know quite well. His name is Rafik. Rafik Hijazi. He's from the Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. I was drawn to him because he was funny, for one thing, which is also, humor is not exactly the hugest commodity on the Palestinian side either. Talk about not funny people, right? And he had this characteristic that I found very, very charming and unusual, which is the ability to be self-critical. Because if Israeli society is excessively self-critical, Palestinian society isn't self-critical enough. Because, of course, Palestinian society just being representative of Muslim society at all. One of the great dysfunctions of Muslim societies today is their inability to look at themselves squarely in the face and figure out what's wrong, what's gone wrong for them. At some point early in Palestinian history, and even earlier in Muslim history, the question shifted from how did we get into this debased position we're in to who did this to us? And this guy, Rafik, was interesting in that he wasn't only asking himself who did this to us. He also had his criticisms of the Palestinian national movement. I felt that we were mirrors in a kind of way. I was an ardent Zionist who was critical of Israel's handling of the Palestinian uprising, and he was a devout Muslim and a hard-headed Fatah nationalist activist. And so we had these conversations. Let me finish with this, because this brings us to the whole subject of the possibility of even understanding each other. This is the day I sort of date in my own mind as the beginning of my Middle East education, when it really began in earnest. There was this really atrocious killing in the prison. We had a lot of violence in the prison, obviously. There was some Israeli on Palestinian, there was Palestinian on Israeli. Most of the violence was Palestinian on Palestinian, because as you might remember, by the end of the first Palestinian uprising, more Palestinians had been murdered by Palestinians than had been killed by Israeli soldiers. The hunt for collaborators, suspected collaborators, was all-encompassing and totally paranoid. And this infection of paranoia spread into the prison. And so in the middle of the night, in these huge tents that we had the prisoners in, they would be interrogating suspected collaborators and torturing them and sometimes murdering them. They would bring the bodies out at first light when we were having our first count of the day, and they would invariably report that the person died in his sleep, even when there were barbed wire marks around the neck. I mean, they wouldn't even bother trying to cover it up. We all knew what happened. And there was this particularly horrible killing in a neighboring block the night before, and it was preceded by a lot of torture. And it prompted in me the following thought. It's, I thought, well, geez, man, if they do this to each other, what are they going to do to me if they get half a chance? Because we were outnumbered 20 to 1 in the prison, and I didn't even have a weapon. My weapon was locked in the bunk because I was in this job that took me too close to the prisoners to have a weapon. So I thought, what's really going on here? So I decided to interrogate Rafiq about this question. I went to his block, and I went over to the fence, and I called him over, and I said, I have a question for you. I just want to give you a scenario. Imagine it's 5 years from now, you're out of jail, I'm not in the army anymore, and somehow we're both in Jerusalem. We both find ourselves in Jerusalem. And I'm walking down the street, and you happen to see me, and you remember me from being in the army. Not only that, you remember me as literally your oppressor. Like, I was the one who had the keys, and I wouldn't let you out. Would you kill me if you had a chance? And he wouldn't answer, and I realized at that moment that there was a certain power imbalance in our relationship that I needed to figure out and rectify. And obviously he's going to be, and I basically said to him, look, it's off the record. This is an off-the-record conversation. It's not the jailer in the jail. It's just two guys standing here in the desert. Would you kill me? And he didn't answer, but I pushed him on the point. And finally he looked at me a little bit exasperated and said, look, if I killed you, it wouldn't be personal. And I realized then, and this is, I've been asking the same question ever since, these same questions ever since in my work. I realized that I was not equipped to understand the Middle East by my American upbringing, because I thought, in the way that I was raised, that when you establish a personal connection with someone, when you break bread with them, when you talk to them, when you find the human qualities in them and allow them to find the human qualities in you, that should trump religion and trump politics and trump tribe. And what I was learning in this place was that didn't necessarily hold true in the Middle East.